Welcome. You are watching BCTV's Meet the Candidates. I'm your host, Olga Peters, and I want to welcome our next candidate. His name is Russell Beste, and he is running as an independent for the U.S. Senate. Welcome, Russell. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
How was your trip down from St. Albans today?
It was fine, no traffic, just a beautiful fall day in Vermont. I mean, one of the best days you can have to drive, so quite nice, actually. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming down all this way. I'm curious, what made you decide to run for the U.S. Senate, and why now?
So what made me run? I think mostly because, I live in Burlington, and I've been very active in our school district and our schools. I have 3 kids in the school system. And over the years, I keep seeing all these kids, great kids, getting great educations, and then they leave, but then they're not coming back. And it kind of slowly dawned on me, and now this year my oldest daughter went off to college. I'm like, wow, I'd kind of like to have her come back, And I thought, well, how can I do that? And so, the option was one, to run as a U.S. Senator. So I looked into it, and you needed about 500 signatures to do it, which was manageable, I thought. And so I decided, well, what the heck? I mean, and plus it's with Bernie Sanders, so what fun is that?
There you go, lots of good debate.
Yes.
I'm curious, you're running as an independent,
Yes.
and what informed that choice?
I've been an independent for a long time, but especially more recently with the rhetoric that's going on between Donald Trump and the other senators and whatnot in the room. And it's become so divisive and so frustrating. And it kind of dawned me that the more people think about it and work on this, the more polar they become. And the news stations also are exacerbating that in a way, because now you got Fox aligned with one side and CNN or NBC on the other, and they're almost polarizing just by their business model in a way. And on top of that, with the internet and communications, you can find example of bad behavior now of left or right any second of the day. So all of a sudden to us, the viewers, it's like, oh my gosh, this world's going crazy, and then you side with one or the other. And really, I want to get back to issues, because at the end of the day, no two people are the same. We also have different ideas, and I can understand both sides a lot of times. And so to focus on issues and not on a side meant I needed to be an independent.
And what are let's say, the top 3 issues that you care the most about right now?
Number one is jobs, to be honest. I really, really want Vermont to continue to grow and thrive. And, the school systems are down by about 20% the last 13 years I've been here. They're down quite a bit in terms of population. And so that to me was the most important thing. And when I look at our economy and if we look at our funding for our teachers' pensions and state government employees, I mean, it's less than 60% funded. So if we don't get money from somewhere, we're all going to be in a world of hurt financially. So that was the main driver, I think.
And other issues, other issues that are really important to you?
Yeah, there's a number. Another one's the environment. I very much am frustrated by, this summer in Lake Champlain, for example, we had a really high microbial count, and kids couldn't go on the beach. I'm like, come on, this is Vermont. We can do better than this, So I felt that was another big issue. And, global warming, it's frightening just to see these monster hurricanes forming. And, I've been to a lot of different beaches and places in the world, and everywhere I look, glaciers are shrinking and beaches are shrinking as well. And so, you can argue what's the cause of it, I suppose, but you can't argue the fact that it's not happening. So that's of concern to me too. And then the third is just this whole issues versus sides things. I really focused on, let's get back to issues. Let's talk issue by issue and not throw labels on people. So,
have you served in any other municipal or official capacity, say select board, school board?
I've never been in a voted in office. I've held many leadership positions throughout my career. I was vice president of the PTO for a number of years at my kids' elementary school, and coached tons of soccer teams and basketball teams and all that kind of stuff. And a leader in my field. I've been in the biotechnology field for a long time, and I've interacted with the FDA a lot. So I've had a lot of experience there. And then I started my own business years ago and ran that for a number of years and dealt with government agencies. So I've dealt with the government a lot throughout my life, but I haven't actually been in an elected capacity before.
What from your daily life, what skills or talents would support you as a senator? Like, what would you bring to the job of senator?
Quite a few things. One, I've interacted with the FDA extensively throughout my career, so I very much understand the government from that perspective. I've personally interacted with a number of employees of the FDA. Also, years ago, I built and designed my own home, and I dealt very closely with building inspectors, so I'm very used to that kind of government capacity interaction and a number of things like that. So that's one. Two, I've been a leader in my field for a long time, and I lead a large group, manage a large budget, and so I'm always dealing with monies. And since it's a private company, that we're, having to earn money to keep our jobs, basically. So we are, on a day-by-day basis, very cost conscious and focusing on the bottom line. And I've always been an innovator, so I have a number of patents in my name, for example, and I've worked with the PTO in that area too. And so I have a lot of that experience as well, just innovating and making things happen. I'm kind of a can-do, make-it-happen kind of guy.
How do you differentiate yourself from Bernie Sanders, your main opponent?
Bernie, so certainly similarities. I very much am for the environment. I very much believe in fighting for the common person and making sure everyone is taken care of. And I fully believe on supporting some minimal wage for people so they can live a comfortable life. I think the biggest difference is probably I'm very much a businessman too. And so I've worked in business most of my life and been very successful at it all on my own. And so I understand how to make those kinds of things happen. And in fact, right now, I'm very active in the Vermont Bioscience Alliance, which is a trade group up in Burlington. And we essentially advocate bringing businesses here. So these are leaders already in Burlington and surrounding communities who have developed these biotechnology type companies. And so we're all advocating to grow that and make it bigger. And then on top of that, I'm working with another company that has about, 160,000 square feet of available space right now. And the same thing, I'm working with them because they're trying to bring in a maker space to bring more companies here. And then I have a lot of connections in the Boston area, so we're trying to bring some of those best businesses possibly up here. So end of the day, my long story short, I'm really trying to bring companies here and not turn it into a Los Angeles or a Boston, but small to mid-sized type companies that can bring, environmentally conscious, clean jobs that would help people, prosper and raise their families.
Just a technical question. You mentioned that you have worked with government agencies in the past. Does your current business have any government contracts that could possibly be
we're
a conflict?
Private company.
And you talk about another thing you talk about is being self-funded.
Yes.
Now, why is that important to you?
That's extremely important to me because I feel like as soon as you take funds from anybody, then you kind of owe them a favor. You may not on paper owe them a contractual favor, but it becomes almost an obligation. And really the whole reason I was running is try to make things as issue by issue. And the best way to be issue by issue is to not owe anybody a favor. So really it's mostly, that's the core of it. And I've had people offer me money and so far I've said no, been tempted, but I've said no. And really the other thing is with the internet, it's amazing. Everything is mostly free anyway. The internet's free, websites are free, Facebook's free, LinkedIn's free, YouTube's free. So I record all my videos and all my presentations in my kitchen, basically, just me, nothing too fancy, and it's free. So really, you have to start asking, why are people needing this much money? Certainly to get television ads and stuff like that, but in a way that's also creating a disadvantage for everybody else to get into politics. Then all of a sudden, if they can take all this money to get on TV, then you're, as an independent candidate, kind of on the outside. But I feel that's just the right thing to do.
And just for clarity, there's independently funded, or self-funded, and then there's publicly funded.
Correct. Fair enough.
And which do you fall into?
I'm independently funded by my wallet.
Your own wallet.
Yes, that's it.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarity. You talk about issue by issue.
Yes.
And I'm curious, when you're out and about campaigning,
yes,
what issues are voters talking to you
about?
Oh
my gosh. Well, so I set up a Facebook page for free, all dedicated to this, and then I took issue by issue and filmed myself just short kind of position opinions, and I published each and every one with a discussion thread, free for anybody to come in and say whatever the heck they want. And oh boy, have people said something.
Oh,
I have
really?
some thread. Oh yeah, it's amazing. I've got 10 different videos right now, and all 10 of each one has threads hundreds long, and people just blasting away. It's really something else. But it's really kind of, well, so for one, there's two real hot topic buttons. One are the gun rights is extremely, divisive, and the other is Bernie. He's also the same polarizing figure.
Oh,
so,
interesting.
Yeah, so those two have really triggered a lot of things. Sometimes I pretty much let people talk and converse, but once in a while I've had to delete threads because they've gotten just to the point where it just was out of control and not appropriate. So it's been a learning experience, and I've actually learned a lot about what Vermonters want just by these people coming in, and they're typing. They're from all over Vermont. They're from Brattleboro. They're from St. Albans. Everywhere, Rutland, you name it. So yeah.
So let's talk about gun rights. How do you come down on that? What's your opinion?
Yeah, so issue by issue, this is one of my hardest ones because there's almost like no good answer here, because when you talk to people who are gun rights, it's very critical to them. But for them, it's a constitutional right to defend themselves. That's the bottom line. So no matter any other opinion you have is going to be interfere with that. Even if you say, okay, well, what about a gun that shoots 1,000 bullets a second, which hasn't been invented yet? Is there ever a limit? And the answer is no. But then, the other people say, well, I want to be safe, and yeah, there's already gun laws that you can't go shoot a shotgun in the city, so we already have gun laws. It's not fully constitutionally enabled. So that's what they say. So it's almost a lose-lose situation in a way from the start. And also, us being in Burlington and in Vermont in general, we're so rural, and guns are such a natural part of our lives, and hunting. It's really in our blood and our DNA for most people who live here. So it's very different here than if you go in New York City, where people, they don't hunt because there's nothing to hunt, and then it's a different kind of issue.
Right.
So.
And for you, what's your feeling? Like, how do you balance those two sides, and how would you work to serve your constituents on this particular issue?
Yeah, I still struggle with this, and I'm still evolving the opinion, to be honest, because, I talk to both sides, and I haven't come up with a great solution yet. I kind of feel in my gut that at some point there's some limit where you have to say enough is enough, especially when you see a tragedy happen at a school, or something like that. Although there's many other things one could do too, mental health preparation, protections at school, stuff like that. But it almost seems like at some point, like if you had a gun that could kill 30,000 people in a second, at that point would you say no? So I don't know if there's a limit someday, but maybe we're not there. So, and then some people say, well, it's a states' right issue, it's not a U.S. issue. And Vermonters will say, well, we're Vermont and we're Vermont, so that's what we do. So that's where I am pretty much. So mostly I don't see myself having much movement either way, because I don't know what I would do. So.
Thank you for that very honest response. Appreciate it. Now, there are a couple things that you talk about wanting to establish.
Yes.
One of them are such things as term limits.
Yes.
But then you also talk about establishing baseline online free college education.
Yes.
For students achieving grade B or above.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Sure. So in regards to that, there's been a lot of discussion over the years about the cost of college, and it's gotten ridiculous. And I can tell you, having my oldest daughter in college, it's insane how much money I'm spending on college. And I feel like I kind of have to, because if you don't, then they miss out, or don't keep up, even though public schools are quite expensive. So there's been a lot of talk about ways to cut costs. And some people said, well, free college, Well, that sounds great, but right now colleges are like some that are 50, 60,000 a year. Even UVM is a good 30,000 or so. I mean, it's expensive. So free, where's that money going to come from? So one thought I had is perhaps what we ought to do is think about, okay, well, what if we provided online college for the first 2 years? That's becoming more and more common. It's not quite as intimate as face-to-face school teacher, but you can learn a lot online now. So perhaps those first 2 years are at least augmented with online and less face-to-face, which would substantially reduce costs. And then it would be more like paying for 2 years instead of 4 years. So that was kind of my thought process on that. And it's still kind of evolving too, but something along those lines I thought would make a lot of sense, kind of taking advantage of the digital age to help people learn and do that. And also there's a lot of people who aren't served well in terms of skill training, who maybe don't want a 4-year academic, liberal arts type education, but want to more, learn how to, maybe program computers, or maybe, do some skill trade or a construction trade. Maybe those skills partially, they still require hands-on, of course, but could be augmented with that kind of online training as well. So in that way, we could help train our population, as jobs continue to shift in different directions with the internet and everything, provide people to get new skills in an inexpensive way.
Now, what about your thoughts on healthcare? Because you also talk about creating free baseline healthcare for all by cutting out the middleman and establishing a multi-layer healthcare system.
Yes,
Talk
that's
about
a lot
that.
of words there.
That's a mouthful.
Well, let's start with the baseline first. So, there's been advocates, and obviously Vermont, we, had our own affordable care and stuff like that, but it's been difficult because the prices just go up and up and up. And then, if you give, some people have advocated free health care for all, but the ticket, some people said that's a $31 trillion spend, or some enormously crazy number. So maybe we, issue by issue, think about more, not baby steps, but more manageable steps. So perhaps maybe, affordable care would mean baseline care, like I'm sick, I need to see a doctor, I can get in and see a doctor. And then the more expensive types of treatments, you'd have to figure insurance or other ways to cover that. So that's kind of where that came from.
Now, just to clarify, when you say baseline care, are you talking about primary care? Are you talking about preventative medicine?
Primary and preventative.
Okay.
So you got the flu, you need some primary care typically. Take care of that. It wouldn't be a full-fledged, hip replacement or something like that, but more moderate type of care.
And how would you consider funding that?
So this is where I got myself in a lot of trouble with my online constituents,
okay.
But I'll do it again anyway, because I think people didn't fully understand, but I thought, okay, how do you fund it, obviously? So one thought I had is recently with Donald Trump and our new taxation, we took the highest level of progressive tax from 39% to 37%. And also I think it's capped, I probably get this number wrong, I think it's at $250,000. I'm pretty sure it's 250. It's either 250 or 500. And then after that, you're always at that highest rate. So I thought, okay, well, to be honest, having had some success, not that level of success, but I have learned the more money you make, the easier it becomes to make more money because you have more flexibility and you can better judge your finances and adjust to bad times and good times, stuff like that.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, well, if I was making $1 million a year, I probably have an even greater advantage. So I thought, well, perhaps then we add a percent, another level. So right now, 37% at say 250,000. Maybe for that next step, up to $1 million a year annual income, you get taxed an extra percent on that part. Okay. And that would be a large amount of money that could help fund that. Now, other people say taxes, no, bad. And I'm not saying taxes for everybody else, but that was one thought. But then other people will say, well, okay, but these people are creating jobs and they're making so much money, they're bringing more income in, so how can you do that to them? And I don't know, I just think it does help to make money, take money to make money. So that would be one potential opportunity.
Well, you do talk about taxes, and you talk about creating a more progressive tax with the idea of balancing the playing field, especially for like working families.
Correct.
What would that look like for you?
Same kind of thing. I feel like, I see a lot of people struggling, especially, with the internet economy. It's, it's developed wonders in terms of efficiencies for our economy, and we can buy stuff for cheap, but a lot less expensive than before. But it's cut out a lot of people. It's got rid of a lot of jobs. Look at all the stores that have disappeared. And same in the business arena. There's a lot of middle management and a lot of layers of jobs have been eliminated. So you have to let people make a living.
Right.
So that's kind of where it was the same kind of driving force is, maybe, something along those lines is not an enormous kind of taxation, but maybe we can pull some monies that way. And the other is maybe just running our government across the nation better and more efficiently. It's hard, private business drives itself to be efficient because if you lose money, you go out of business.
Money, yeah.
So you have to adjust. In government, it's a little bit different because you're a little more insulated and protected that way. And so I'm not saying cut jobs, but I am saying maybe we could drive our business to be more efficient or more business-like in a way with, I've suggested performance metrics and stuff like that. And again, I'm not talking about attacking government or anything like that, but maybe there's ways we can get more out of it, and help them thrive too. I think some people in government are kind of, limited by what they can do. Maybe they want to be more empowered. So it's a long-winded answer to that.
Thank you.
It's a complicated topic.
There's been a lot of talk, especially in Vermont, as being one of the whitest states in the country and needing to be more inclusive and accepting of all forms of diversity.
Correct.
You talk about supporting equality and diversity. What are some of your thoughts on that? Do you have programs in mind, initiatives?
Yeah, certainly open-minded in support, but it's true. I used to live in California 13 years ago, and the first thing I noticed when I got off the plane is, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't bother me, but it was like very interesting coming from, the Bay Area, which has had, Asians and all, every ethnic group you can imagine everywhere. It's just different. So as far as actually implementing, I think, Vermonters are unique and they're so open-minded. I have to say, honestly, of all the states I've visited, it's amazing how open-minded Vermonters are in general and welcoming. Like I haven't ever sensed that. And even in the Burlington School District where my kids go to school, and there is an ethnic contingent of people who are brought in from some of the ravaged nations, there are a little bit more of ethnic diversity there. But even then, it's like, it definitely, there's a lot of work that has to come in of just integrating, and these people still come from a different culture altogether, so it takes a long time to do that. So I think it's being proactive as us as citizens to help bring them into the society.
And I want to circle back to what you were talking about, polarization.
Yes.
And not being left or right, but being about issues.
Yes.
You would be going, if you were elected, you would be going into a very polarized government and a very polarized system. What is your strategy for bringing people who are used to butting heads to the same table to work on issues?
Yeah, I know. I thank you very much. It's near and dear to my heart. I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face as a country. I mean, just in the latest Kavanaugh trials and all that, you could see that division. It was terrible, really terrible for a lot of reasons. But my thoughts are, again, it's hard. It's the hardest place to be, is to be a compromiser. It's actually pretty easy to be a far left or a far right, because then you don't have to think or argue or anything. You just tell them, this is my opinion, and take it or leave it,
Right.
But that's not the way life works. It rarely does in the business world or in marriage or anything. It's just not that way. And so issue by issue is what I'm really focusing on. I say that again and again. I literally mean every issue. And it's funny, when I go to one issue, like I believe in trying to fight for global warming, and immediately I'm labeled, oh, you leftist, liberal, what are you thinking, And then the next day I put up my thoughts on pro-business and making a more business-friendly environment. Oh, you conservative this, it's like, it's almost a natural want to label these days, and we need to stop labeling. And it's hard to be in that, because then you're like kind of stuck in between, and then people say, oh, well, you're just wishy-washy in the middle. But no, one's maybe more a one-side issue and one's a support on another side, right? But you're not just wishy-washy middle, but you're defending two different issues independently without a label. And so that's really tough, because then you don't have the full support of one side or the other. But I think that's the best place to be, and I think if more people did that and really focused on issues, I think we'd all be a much better place globally as well as in Vermont.
Well, and just getting back to that with the nitty-gritty, I mean, how do you make that happen when you are working with people who are, they're retreating to their own corners?
Yeah.
And you've got to get them on the same page.
Oh yeah, well, read my threads on my Facebook page, because it's tricky, because some people are just black and white, and some people just aren't going to agree, and they're just going to say, I'm sorry, that's me, too bad, take it or leave it. And that's fine, but I try to just be polite and civil and just express my opinions and not get sucked down that rat hole of like tit for tat, cutting each other down, because you don't win that way. And as soon as, I've learned that in business too, as soon as you start trying to undermine somebody with like calling them a name, or, even if you disagree with them, as soon as you go down that path, it can just devolve into even a worse situation. It never solves anything. And so in business, I'm always, having arguments with people, because that's how we work. We have a stressful job, but we keep it civil, or we try to as best we can, and that's always the best way.
Anything you'd like to add, wish I had asked?
Oh gosh, term limits. I'd love to talk more about term limits. So personally, I think, so I'm very much for term limits because, well, for one, in the business world, you'd never keep a CEO for 2 or 3 decades. You just wouldn't. Why? Because we know there's all kinds of people with good ideas, different ideas. They're different, but they're good because they're different.
Right.
So for that reason alone, I think we should have some controls over that. So some people will say, well, okay, that's fine and dandy, but we're talking about U.S. senators here, and they have all this experience and stuff like that. And I see that, but again, we're losing out all these ideas, so we don't have those ideas. And in our Senate race, we really haven't had much at all. So in terms of turnover, so there hasn't been that opportunity. So that's part of it. And then just the term limits in general. I think even for our Supreme Court, we got to think about that. Which is, I know people don't like to hear that, but
no, I think some people are thinking that right now.
Yeah, and I didn't mean specifically for the
Right.
current situation, but just in general, maybe it would be good at 20 years to have a new justice come in rather than lifetime. I think that might help us all as a nation.
And what would be the term limits for Senate and House?
So Senate, I thought a long time. First I was thinking 2, but maybe 3 terms, 2 to 3 terms, 12 to 18 years I would think for a Senate. And then for a Supreme Court, maybe 20 years or something, because that is, a lot of these court cases at that level drag on for years anyway, so you don't want to have too much turnover.
Right.
So maybe 20 years I thought would be something appropriate.
Russell Beste, thank you. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Oh, so the easy way is www.russellbeste.com, one word, 2 S's, 2 L's, and then also facebook.com/Vermont Beste.
Russell, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.